Perky Plains and RC here, operating at 2.4 gigahertz, and it's the holidays. I'm gonna drink my pop until after the first of the year. Excellent, excellent. All right, how's everybody doing out there? Just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update here on the glider wing, which I had been working on over some of the holiday time here, and working on trying to get a, let's see, what is it, 90-inch wingspan glider, getting 90 inches of glider wing to completely split in half so I could transport it. So that has been a focus of mine for this glider project that I'm doing, and as you can see, we pretty much are successful. Here's half of it right here. There's my part of my joining mechanism there, and of course here is the other wing. Let me take a little moment here and show you guys the thing in all its glory, because all you're seeing is just a little piece of it. So let's get to it. All right, guys, here you have it. This is the wing fully assembled, and how large it is. Like I said, this is 3 sheets of foam board long or wide. So here's your first sheet here. Here is the second sheet, which I have split in half, of course, for the to join together. And of course, over here is the third sheet. All right, now a couple things that I wanted to kind of talk about with the wing itself. Remember, this is the design from Planiac 01 on the flight test forums. It's one of his designs. Again, not an official flight test plane, but you know, it's about as close as you can get to one, since it uses a lot of the same techniques and things like that. All right, thought I'd give you guys a little close up here on how I did the split, where these wings actually, the wing halves actually join. Basically, what I had done is, you can kind of see in here, you know, here's your main spar, of course, and of course the other side looks exactly the same. What I had done is, on each spar, you can kind of see it here, this is a paint stick that I glued onto the underside of the spar. And that paint stick, I didn't cut it or anything. It goes the full length that it goes. I think they're usually about, I don't know, 14, 16 inches, something like that. So that spar, or that paint stick, goes all the way, you know, out this way. And then, of course, it duplicates here on the other side as well. And then what I did was, on one side of the wing, which happens to be this side over here, I had glued this yardstick over top of that paint stick and let it extend the rest of the way through. And then I more or less used the paint stick, or the yardstick here, as a joiner. This is actually what's going to join the 2 wing halves together. And I had then went ahead and, like I said, this side's actually permanent. You can't remove this side here at all, you know, over here. And what I had done is, I drilled a hole on both sides. So one over here on this wing half, and this screw will probably stay permanent on this side, since this is the permanent attached side. And I also drilled a hole over here on this side as well, and you can kind of see the hole here itself. And when this is actually inserted into this half of the wing, it is then, of course, screwed down on this side. So this, more or less, right here, this paint, or the yardstick and all that, along with this, secures the wing in place so that it won't slide apart. And then I use some larger kind of landing gear wire right here, and then a carbon fiber arrow tube right here, so this wire will slide into that tube there to sort of give it some stability on the front, on the leading edge. And on the trailing edge, I just went ahead and glued a paint stick here, which will be inserted into this part. This way it kind of keeps the wing from, you know, not, you know, flexing like that. And that is basically how I did it. Like I said, I've never done joining and I've never actually did this from scratch, where I actually decided to have two wing halves joined. So this is the first. So we'll see how it does. But just want to kind of go and show you guys how this works. And something else I kind of want to mention here as well. Like I said, this was a Flite Test community member, Planiac 01 design. So, you know, it wasn't a traditional Flite Test design, of course, but it does have a lot of other techniques. But, you know, there was no build video with this, of course. There was some pictures and some descriptions, and of course the actual plans themselves too. So that's more or less what I went by. Now, you know, aside from following that information, of course, I also had to come up with the method for joining the two wing halves together. So that was kind of a tricky part here. But overall construction of the wing was not too bad at all. I followed his description and the plans and all that. Although I must say, this is just my preference, but I found it to be much easier to construct the wing using just some of the basic measurements, and using a ruler and a razor blade and things like that, versus trying to cut it through the plans. Normally I tape the plans to the foam board, cut it, and be done with it. But this is one of those particular designs where it was just so massive. It's like it became easier for me just to basically make the cuts needed, measure the distance between the front bevel cut for the leading edge, and it was easier for me just to go ahead and actually measure it out and cut it versus trying to cut through the plans. So if you happen to use this design, you know, you might find that to be easier to do as well, depending on how you actually go through these like Flite Test plans. But like I said, it was just easier for me just to go ahead and measure and cut it versus actually trying to tape all the plans together and cut it that way. So, but it's just different strokes for different folks, basically. But something I wanted to kind of mention here that was mentioned in the build instructions is that normally with the wings from Flite Test, the whole wing itself, from the bottom here all the way up to the top part of the wing, that will usually utilize a single sheet of foam board for that entire width, for this entire width here. That usually utilizes a full sheet of foam board, where of course you make your cuts and your cut your bevels and whatnot, and then of course it folds over. Okay. And like I said, usually just the full size of a sheet of foam board will allow you to do that. This particular plane and design wing is just so massive that a sheet of foam board, as far as its actual dimensions, would not work. So what ended up happening is in the fold over process, you had to, and this was, like I said, it was mentioned in his instructions, you had to add an extension to the bottom of the wing itself. If you see this here, this is actually some additional foam board that was taped and glued on to this part right here. If you notice, all this wing half has that. So, so more or less, this was an extension that was added on to the foam board, so that whenever you had it all together, it would fold over nicely and use the single sheet. So, you did have to add an extension to it. That was something a little bit new to me, but of course, it was explained very well, and it, of course, did work just fine. One thing I didn't really want to mention, though, is that I think in his plans, in his descriptions, I think he said something like it was something like a 3-inch extension. Mine ended up being longer, which I think he thought maybe it was a mistake on his part, but I think I probably just did something silly, and that's why it ended up being longer. But regardless, maybe you'll have the same experience, maybe you won't. But maybe I didn't do a miscalculation somewhere. But regardless, I mean, it essentially made the wing surface here much much wider than the original design. What's this basically mean? It technically, in theory, should give you much greater wing surface area, thus resulting in better gliding capabilities. So I'm thinking that this is actually going to glide very nicely. I'm sure the original design, from what I remember seeing of it, it did wonderful. So this will probably do just as well, even though this was a little bit longer and wider than the original design. So I'm thinking myself, this is going to fly very well. So let's hope on that one. Okay, but as far as that's really all that we came across with the glider. Um, again, the joining was a big feat there that we had to overcome and figure out. Uh, so, but anyways, that is all from me. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions about this, like I said, this is my first attempt at joining two large wing halves together. But again, if you have any questions on it, please leave me some comments. I'll be glad to answer them for you. And we will see you in the next video.